I'm not sure there would be a way to measure or quantify what is the strongest emotion. Uh, my intuition from my own life is that the two strongest emotions that I feel are love and fear. I'd love to get rid of fear and have nothing but love, and yet I don't see that happening. I just see fear as a visitor for me. Honestly, when a fear does what it's supposed to do, it's actually not an enemy. And when it only does what it's supposed to do, it's not a hindrance. It's a gift, really, because what is the function of fear? The function of fear is simply to escalate my senses so that I have a heightened awareness and readiness to deal with threat. So if we didn't have that, well, if God hadn't have put that in human beings, I don't think we would have, the race wouldn't have gone past Adam and Eve once they got out of the garden, because then the world is full of threat. Now, the difficulty I experience is that my the part of my brain that God has equipped me with that registers threat. It's in what's called the limbic system, and specifically in one little piece called the amygdala. So if you ever get on Jeopardy, now you got a little ammo for one of the harder scientific questions. But what it does is it fires off so that your body can respond to threat, and it has no regard for the amount of threat, the level of threat, the intensity or not. All threat is threat. Well, if fear has gotten my attention and set me up to be alert and aware, then that's the biggest part of its job. But once it has finished that, if it doesn't recede back into the background, so that this front part of my brain can begin making judgments and assessments, which, oh, by the way, your amygdala makes no assessment. It makes no judgment. It's not capable of that. But it will hijack this prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that does make judgments. So I'm getting way deep in the weeds on this, and there's no good reason for it. Here's the point. When fear does its work and nothing more, it's good. But if it crosses the line and now it's no longer, if fear is doing more than it needs to do, then it begins to become a hindrance. And if it goes very far down the trail, it can become an enemy. All humans are dealing with, every living human is dealing with fear. I don't say constantly, but I will say very nearly constantly, we're trying to evaluate threat. Our world is full of threats. Oh, and by the way, people have learned they can sell product, any kind of product almost, but especially like news media and entertainment, if they keep you with a heightened sense of threat, fear, and anxiety. Don't get me started on that, because then I'll get really political, and that's not necessarily. So why am I talking about all this? Fear and love. Love, easy to see, because love is topic either number one or number two of the entire Bible. And We've been talking about that from 1 John chapter 4, where we started looking at verse 18 last time. So let's pick it up there. There is no fear in love. Bold statement. Very bold statement. Love and fear cannot coexist. Really? Well, don't forget, you have to look at the context to think and be able to process and incorporate. Okay, what kind of, is there a way for us to get a glimpse of the kind of fear? Because there are lots of different kinds of fear, right? Is John just talking about all fear? I don't think so. Look back at verse 17. This is how love is made complete among us. And now, I mean, we're connecting love here. We're starting with it. So that we may have confidence on the day of judgment. I believe, I said it last time, I'm going to make the point again, the kind of fear that John is talking about, writing about here, is a fear of God's judgment upon us. And we have to take a close look at this again. One of the things I didn't talk about last time that we've got to touch on, and we're not going to go deeply into it, but we have to touch on the fact that we're talking about the fear of God's judgment, not fear of God. Oh, now I'm splitting hairs, right? Probably. But there is a difference. The Bible, in the Old Testament, it's very, very often a part of the whole picture. And in the New Testament as well, the fear of God is a part of the deal. What does that mean? Does that mean that we have this terror toward God? No, see, now, I think that the terror that sometimes we feel, people feel, has to do with fearing his punishment, fearing his judgment, because he doesn't punish until he judges, right? We fear that. But there is this other sense of fear that it goes at least a couple of directions. The first one is, I'm not held hostage by this fear, but there are times I have this fear that I will or have said or done things that will harm my relationship with my wife, right? And so, yeah, that happens with people we love and are close to. We don't want to damage that relationship in any way, and there is a sense of fear. I fear that would happen, and so the fear of that often keeps me from drifting over and doing those things. So, okay. And then there is this other fear. My most vivid illustration of this experience of this kind of fear goes back to in 2020, the first time as an adult that I stood at the edge of the Grand Canyon on the south rim rather. Never got to the north rim, and maybe one day I will, but the first lookout point as you enter the park from the south is Mather's Point. You pull in, and the parking is in a lower area, and you have to walk up an incline to get to the mouth of the canyon. And you get to the top of that rise, and boom, the canyon just explodes before you. It was wonderful friends of ours, Don and Susie Bew, had helped us get ready to get there at sunset. And the colors, the shading, the shadows, everything about it, the day was perfect, which there are not, every day is not perfect on the rim of the Grand Canyon. It was breathtaking. I looked at that, and a couple of things came to my mind. The first thing that came to my mind was, done by chance over time? No. No. Way no. The second thing was, I think I'd be stupid not to be a little bit afraid of the one who did this, however he did it. There is this awe, this awesomeness of God's work and creation, what he does in the world, how he shows up, his presence. I think that, that is a legitimate part of the fear of God. Now, you don't want to, it's not worthy to just stop at reverence for God. That's the whole thing about fear of God, reverence. Yeah, reverence is part of it, but don't forget, God is wholly other and supremely powerful. You can't get away from, you gotta be a little bit afraid of a being like that. Although we have the assurance here that we don't have to be afraid of his judgment. I think there's an unreconcilable tension in that. I can't explain it. I can't fix it. I just know it's there, and it's worth you contemplating. The fear of God. Some people, actually, I'm part of this group, came to say yes to Jesus on his terms because we feared his punishment if we didn't. I don't think that's bad. I don't think it's wrong. Now, if that's all there was, and if I never grew beyond that fear of punishment, that would be wrong. And John says there is no fear in love. You don't have to fear this fear of being judged by God, because love cancels. No, it's more than that. He says perfect love drives out fear. And here's why. Because fear has to do with punishment. The one who fears is not made perfect in love. So let's just quickly, I think we can figure this piece out without too many words, but no, forget it. I've never been able to do things without too many words. But perfect love drives out fear, okay? Fear, especially this fear of punishment, cannot coexist with perfect love. Perfect, another word for perfect here in this context, it could have been translated complete. When love is complete, it drives out fear. And here's why. Because fear has to do with punishment. You see, we don't have to fear punishment anymore. And the reason why is because we can have confidence. And where does that go back to? Now we're in verse 12. We have confidence because God's love is being made complete in us. And here's the thing. Here's how we know, and here's how we have confidence. In this world, we are like Jesus. As God shapes us to be more and more like Jesus, our values are more his values. The thoughts that we have are more his thoughts. The desires we have are more his desires. Wow. Well, when you're becoming like a perfect person, you are becoming less broken, less flawed, less fractured. You see? And so John says, fear has to do with punishment. We don't have to fear that punishment. The one who fears is not made perfect in love. All right. what are we going to do about that? Well, I'll talk about it when we get together next time on Soul Care with Stevie Boy.